Hello, everyone. Welcome. So I'm very, very pleased. My name is Nick Yulman. I'm Design and Tech Outreach Lead here at Kickstarter, and I'm very, very pleased to kick off the official Design Month here at Kickstarter, where all month we'll be having events celebrating the design category and the amazing work that comes out of it. So we're very privileged to, for this panel, have a set of 3 amazing creators who will be talking to you about their work and sharing tips about how they approach their campaigns and built an audience on Kickstarter. And to start off with, I'm going to be just walking through some top-level view of working with Kickstarter and some of the amazing things that people have done with design here on the platform. So let's get started. So as I said, I am the design and tech outreach lead here, which just basically means I have the privilege of working with creators in those 2 wonderfully diverse categories. People create all kinds of things on Kickstarter, and that is our basic mission, just to create something to share with others. And we are here to support creative projects of all stripes. So that happens across 15 different creative categories, so our definition of creativity is quite expansive. So of course, the 2 categories that I work with, design and technology, but that's also art and film and food and many other things that people are making every day on Kickstarter. And across the site, we've had over 84,000 projects successfully funded, and that represents over $1.6 billion pledged. The people pledging that money, the backers, 8.5 million of them at this point. And significantly within that, there's a community of 2.5 million repeat backers, so people who probably came to Kickstarter because they were a fan of a particular project, but have stuck around and have really found a lot of other things that they're excited about and continue to support. And this is significant to us because across the site, 60% of all dollars pledged actually comes from that community of repeat backers. So this is a really important part of our growth as a platform and just the continued success of projects on Kickstarter, this community of people who keep coming back to support projects. And our reach is really global at this point. So people from nearly every country on Earth have backed a project on Kickstarter. That's all 7 continents, including Antarctica. So somebody sitting in an ice base there is a fan of Kickstarter and has backed multiple projects. We're very proud to say that we've had a significant impact on culture at this point. And this manifests itself in many different ways, both large and small, but some of the large ones. So 7 Kickstarter-funded films have been nominated for Academy Awards. 1 took home an Oscar in 2013. And art and design projects that have been funded on Kickstarter have found their ways into some of the biggest institutions, museums throughout the US and beyond. So this is, for instance, an example of, an amazing campaign called Minecaphone, which is this amazing design object designed to diffuse landmines that's now part of the permanent collection in the MoMA. And of course, people are creating things beyond just products and beyond just films. They're creating community spaces, places where people can come together. So this is a map showing some of the restaurants, movie theaters, makerspaces, and museums that people have launched with help on Kickstarter. So appealing to a very local audience and really gaining support for something that's going to matter to that local community. Within design, we have amazing partnerships, for instance, with the MoMA Design Store. So the 3 Doodler was a tremendous success story. They essentially invented the 3D printing pen on Kickstarter, and then they've gone on to be one of the best sellers at the MoMA Design Store. And you may know we have a collaboration with MoMA Design where we've curated a couple of different sets of projects, placing the work of Kickstarter designers in front of the audience at MoMA that has responded tremendously. And at least a dozen Kickstarter-funded projects have actually been launched into space. So this is everything from small satellites that people have included aboard NASA CubeSat missions to a slice of pizza that the band Anamanaguchi shot into space for a music video. So how does Kickstarter work? What are the basic ways to approach a Kickstarter campaign, and how do we think about it? A Kickstarter campaign is something that fits into one of our 15 creative categories. So as I said, our definition of creativity is quite expansive, so many things do fit in. Projects have to be honest and clearly presented. So on the level of design projects and some of the technology campaigns, fundamentally that means you need to be able to show a working prototype, and be able to represent to backers, this is the stage that we're at right now, and this is why we need your help to take it to the next level. And we'll look at some examples of prototypes later. And then also, just some basic rules about what's not allowed on the platform. So you can't fundraise for charity, you can't offer financial incentives, so it's not an equity investing platform. It's really about investing to make a thing happen that you hopefully will experience. And then, we have a list of prohibited items, so no weapons and no things that claim to cure or treat diseases. But beyond that, we're quite open, and really many, many people working in many different fields go on to successfully launch Kickstarter campaigns. And then, of course, the mechanism for a Kickstarter project that you're all familiar with, I'm sure, is you set your funding goal, and you set a duration of time. And if you achieve that funding goal within that duration of time, then those money goes to you, and the backers are charged, and then you go on to make the thing. If you don't make that goal, then no money changes hands whatsoever. So you're not charged a fee, and your backers aren't charged. And why do we believe in this platform? Why all or nothing funding? Because there's different approaches out there, we know. I mean, first and foremost, it works. We've had this proven model of success throughout our history here. But it's also, importantly, less risk for everybody involved. So if you are creating something and you need $10,000 to make it real and to be able to actually produce it and ship it out to backers, you really don't want to be on the hook for actually shipping that out if you only raise half of that. And likewise, as a backer, it's important that you not be supporting a campaign that doesn't gain all of the, the funding, all the resources it needs to go on and succeed. So that's why we think all or nothing funding is actually a better model as far as risk reduction for everyone. But perhaps more enjoyably, it's just compelling. The drama that a campaign creates, that 30-day or however long period, where you're essentially having this prolonged press release, this opportunity to tell your story, to engage with your backers, to really learn your community and what they want, that's an amazing opportunity. And it creates this sense of drama of, will they reach this goal? And this is now my time to kind of jump on board early and be among the first people to support this thing that doesn't exist in the world yet. So again, that's why we think this all or nothing model is the best model. So as far as success rates and people who go on to reach that goal, 40% of projects across the site go on to reach that funding goal, which is pretty astonishing when you think about it, that level of success. And even within that, that's actually artificially low in some ways because 17% of unsuccessful projects don't receive a single pledge. So this is essentially people who perhaps haven't really built out a full campaign or put up a campaign and don't bother to tell anyone about it. So you can really actually think of that success rate as probably a good bit higher among campaigns that have put in the due diligence and the real effort involved in crafting a Kickstarter campaign. And then we have a phenomenon that we call the tipping point as far as building an audience and raising funds. So that is, 79% of projects that raise 20% of their goal go on to successfully fund. So really, it is about, before you launch and as you're thinking about your campaign, what is the core audience that you're building and that will jump on board early and who are real firm believers who will spread the word, try to reach that 20% mark, and often that's enough to push you onto the edge. Obviously, the things that you often hear about with Kickstarter are these blockbuster projects, so things that are raising $1 million plus or changing the world in a variety of ways, and that's certainly things that we're excited about. But it's very important to note that the majority of projects across the site raise between $1,000 and $10,000. So this, for us, is very exciting. It's really an important thing for us to see that smaller projects are thriving on the site. It's a lot about the ecosystem that we're building and its sustainability, that people are not just turning out for these blockbusters that are getting all the headlines and that are making a huge splash in the world of technology and design, but also smaller projects that are going to appeal to a smaller group of people but are continuing to come to the site. So let's turn our focus a little bit and talk about the design category. So across that category, more than 4,600 successful projects have been funded. That's over $280 million pledged, and 1.5 million backers and counting. Within that, $15,000 is the average funding goal that people set. In many cases, they're exceeding that, but that's an average that people set. And the average amount raised within design is $55,000. So again, a little bit higher than that $1,000 to $10,000 bucket that we saw for the site-wide average, but again, not $1 million projects happening every day in the design category necessarily, a lot of smaller projects. And then we do have, we're very privileged to have a lot of larger projects as well, people who have gone on to raise significant amounts. So over 400 projects have raised over $100,000 within the design category. So let's look at a few examples. So of course, we'll start with Pebble, just because it's the way that many people first learned about Kickstarter probably through the tremendous success of the Pebble campaign. And the thing that we're excited about with Pebble, aside from the fact that obviously they have broken all the records and raised huge amounts of money on Kickstarter, they've really built an amazing community. So the story of Pebble coming back to Kickstarter and launching this second campaign is really a story of loyalty to that core audience that they initially built on Kickstarter. So their fans, they knew, were people who first funded them on that first Kickstarter campaign. They decided to come back and offer that to those people first, and the results were astounding. But of course, the design category is much, much broader than that. And it's not all about new gadgets. It's not all about these very large campaigns. A lot of projects on Kickstarter that go on to do very well are also in more kind of traditional design areas. So this is the New York City Transit Authority Standards Manual. So this was an amazing project that took this classic of New York City design. So this was the standards manual that the MTA put together for the design systems within the subway, and they decided to recreate it and reprint it and found an amazing audience of kind of design aficionados and fans of New York City transit. And then the design category also includes people who are doing architecture and civic design projects. So this is a project that's live on the site right now, the Thames Baths, which is raising money to build a public swimming pool for Londoners. So taking this waterway that once was safe to swim in and trying to create a place where people can once again enjoy it. And then, of course, many beautiful smaller product design projects as well. And really, the opportunity that you have, of course, in presenting a campaign on Kickstarter is not just to offer the finished product, but to really tell the story of how you got there. So some of our favorite components of Kickstarter campaigns are when people are really breaking down the way that they got to this finished product and showing the progression of their prototypes. So for instance, this beautiful project, Polygon, these very nice animal sculptures that snap together magnetically, this was from their campaign page showing how they got there and all the different iterations of the prototype that came to it. And then, of course, another interesting part of telling the story of design that you often don't get when you just walk into a store and just buy a product off the shelves is, how is the thing made? What is the experience of going from that prototype to manufacturing? So again, here is a really interesting project, the Neo Lucida, which took the camera lucida, which is this Renaissance-era drawing tool, and modernized it and wanted to make it accessible again for modern artists. And this was an image from one of their campaign updates after they had successfully funded, and as you can see, raised money from 11,000 backers. This was an image that they shared from their factory as they were deciding which of these prisms was the best fit for the design. So really bringing that backer community, that community of fans, into the design process, inviting them to see a side of product design that you don't usually get to. So I imagine many of you are here because you have your own design projects that you're hoping to run on Kickstarter and would like to find out more about how that's possible. And we want to talk to you. We want to hear about the people who are going to be creating the next versions of all these great projects we already looked at. So you can always write to us at design@kickstarter.com. I'm part of a team of 3 people who works with the design category, and we would love to hear about what you're working on and help you succeed on Kickstarter. And so with that, I would love to invite up to the stage our esteemed panelists. If you could please join me here. And we always say, it's great to talk to us, and it's great to hear about what we think is effective on Kickstarter, but there's really no better way to learn about how to succeed on Kickstarter and how to think about your campaign than to talk to people who have really been through it. So this is what you all have the opportunity to do right now. So I will take my seat. I'll start off by introducing Kelly Angood of the Pop-Up Pinhole Company. Kelly, I wonder if you could start by just describing a little bit what it is that you make, and we have some visual aids here.
Yeah, so I've basically had 2 Kickstarter campaigns. This is actually for my second Kickstarter campaign. This is for Vidi. I make do-it-yourself pinhole camera kits that are educational, but also sit in the gift category as well. They come as flat pack, they're all self-assembly. You can make them within about 30 minutes, and they allow people to experience pinhole photography. So whether you're an artist that just wants to experiment, or you're someone that's never used pinhole photography before, I kind of try and make them as accessible as possible for anyone that just wants to give it a go.
That's great. And next we have Dave Laituri of 100. And Dave, you're actually on, I think, your 6th Kickstarter campaign, is that right?
This one's live. Go check it out. That's my big message for tonight.
Yeah, and so you have you've approached the product design category in a lot of different ways. So what are some of the things you've made on Kickstarter?
Well, we've run 6 projects, and our very first project was in 2012. Was for a wood Bluetooth speaker project called 1Q. And one of my takeaways was we raised $200,000 on a $10,000 goal, but we'd met 1,400 really passionate people that said, boy, when you got another product, let us know. We'll be right there for you. And we didn't. We didn't develop products that quickly. So I created this little company called 100 where we only work within 100 miles of Boston. My son is my business partner. Unfortunately, he couldn't be here today. But we do very simple things kind of quickly so that we can do another one right away so that our crowd can follow us from one product to the other without forgetting about us. So we do very simple kind of fun things like Pucks the Whiskey Stones. We did this little bird feeder. Fun story here is from a prototype with a pencil and a bootlace and a piece of notebook cardboard to shipping to 57 countries was just 5 months. It's kind of crazy. Yeah, so we have fun with it. And our goal is to run 4 projects a year and to build a whole portfolio of interesting little things that all have been made within 100 miles of Boston.
Thank you. And then finally, we have Julie Kerwin of I Am Elemental. Can you tell us a little bit about what we're seeing here?
Sure. So we launched essentially the first female action figure designed for children. And so we used Kickstarter as, I like to say, test the hypothesis. So we had a concept, and we designed the first series, which is called the Courage series, and we launched a year ago, just a year ago on Kickstarter. We're coming up on 1 year, and we had tremendous success with it. And again, this notion of kind of being able to condense the process. So we closed in June, and we delivered in December. And when I went to Toy Fair this February, I was explaining that, from Mattel to Hasbro to Spin Master, everyone was commenting on how fast we produced the product. And that really is a huge part of what happens kind of once you're in the Kickstarter cycle. And we've had a great time with it. We have our second figure just went into production. Our second figure is the Courage figure. She's a 6-inch figure, and she is the embodiment of the first 7 figures. And so we're already rolling out product for the holidays this year.
All right, excellent. Well, I wanted to start off by just asking, often we find that people who are running design projects on Kickstarter, they're here to do much more, obviously, than just to make something and sell it to people. So it's always exciting to hear what are the kind of philosophies, the design principles, and just kind of the reason for existing that you feel go into the projects that you created. So do you want to start off with this, Julie? It seems like
Sure.
a very direct motivation.
Sure. Well, yeah. So essentially, what was happening in my home is we were asking ourselves, why does Spider-Man appeal to a boy of 4 and a man of 40, but there's no female equivalent? And this was the question that we were asking. And at the time, I was actually thinking not at all about action figures. I was reading a lot of educational work by, there was a pioneering study by Angela Duckworth about the notion that grit is more important than even intelligence to success, and a book by Paul Tough that continued that idea. I went to see a lecture by a brain expert named Joanne Deek, and she was actually there to talk about boy development because I have sons. But my big takeaway of the night was girls and boys are as different from the neck up as they are from the neck down. So all of this was kind of swirling in my head. And I joke that my husband and I were talking about it one night, and I literally woke up the next morning, and it was like Athena born out of Zeus's head. And I said, I have the answer. It's not superheroes, it's superpowers. And I hopped out of bed, and I took the periodic table, an empty one, and I started filling in character traits, courage and wisdom and creativity. And within 24 hours, we had a domain name, we had a concept. I think within a week, we had this entire concept developed. And we really stayed very close to it, to that original idea. And we knew from the outset that we were going to, as I said, test the hypothesis on Kickstarter. Kickstarter really was the vehicle in which we could take this idea that we thought was a good one and bring it out to the marketplace and actually see if there would be a response to it, that the one that we thought we would have, without having to invest an enormous amount of money or find investors or try to sell it to a larger company first. And it worked for us in a really astounding way.
That's great. And Dave, you already sort of hinted at what is the organizing principle for all of your products, but can you talk a little bit more about that? And how did you arrive at this idea that all of the products you produce would be manufactured within 100 miles of your home base?
Well, I guess I get one of these.
It's a privilege.
Well, I've worked my entire career developing products for big companies, working out of China, and have done it successfully and kind of ran that cycle for quite a while. And the idea of 100 is to build relationships with local manufacturers. And 100 miles is the distance we can drive there and back in a day. And to be perfectly honest, it's more like 40. I don't think we've ever gotten beyond 40 miles away from home.
The 40 doesn't sound as cool, though.
I know, 100's kind of a little more all-inclusive, right? So, yeah, we work backwards. We try to understand who's in our little lifeboat, who can make what their skills and capabilities are, what kind of machines they have, and then we design things they can produce. So we kind of work backwards, which is why our portfolio is really quirky. You get barware and leather products and a bird feeder, and we got all kinds of crazy stuff. So it's really dependent on who we have in our neighborhood. And if we kind of come up with something that we can't find anybody to produce, then we don't make it. It's kind of that simple. So, upside down.
And Kelly, what was the genesis of your projects? I mean, it started off as actually a university project, right?
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, mine wasn't as quick as your guys at all. Like I started making pinhole cameras when I was at university in 2012. I was actually on an illustration course, but I was just rubbish at drawing, so I always used to make stuff. One of my projects, I'd set my own project to make a pinhole Hasselblad. It was during my sort of end-of-year degree show that project ended up being on a few different blogs, and it did the rounds on the internet a little bit. And it was then that people started contacting me, and they were like, oh, is this a product? Can I buy it somewhere? And it was really just a personal project, something that I'd never even thought about as being a product at all. And I moved back with my parents after university, which I'm sure is a really normal thing these days, but I wanted to keep up the momentum of being at art school. So I designed this pinhole camera into a downloadable version. It was as a PDF for my website. And that ended up having around about 30,000 downloads, which retrospectively, I probably should have asked people for £1, or I'm from London, so a couple of dollars for whatever. But, I didn't. But actually, that was really what started off, I guess, my pinhole journey and gave me a bit of a small community in terms of what I can then rely on later when I did the Kickstarters. So after that, I was a set designer for a while. I worked in the fashion industry, the music industry. I worked in a coffee shop, as most people do, and I was a strategist in advertising. And people were still asking me about these cameras. And it was around about that time that Kickstarter launched in the UK. And I was like, well, maybe this is a time to try it. So, I, in my spare time, set to work about designing a new camera and then launched it on Kickstarter, and it was successful. And that was really the start of my commercial journey into pinhole photography. It was honestly something that I never thought I'd be able to say would be a business, but it's really just come from something I was really passionate about when I was at school.
Excellent. Yeah. So 3 very different paths to creating something through this platform, which is really, again, the diversity of the projects that come through even just one category is something that's really exciting for us. So when you finally realized that this was something that you wanted to bring to Kickstarter, you felt like that this was a good venue for launching it. How did you approach that task of taking all this work and telling the story of how you came to it? Julie, what was your approach there in kind of crafting a video and letting people know what's behind all of the thinking here?
Right. Well, it's interesting because, first of all, I always say that at my core, I'm a researcher, obsessively. Reading, research, that's what I do. If there were a degree in research and reading for pleasure, I would take it. So naturally, the first thing I did was started watching videos, hundreds and hundreds of Kickstarter videos. And, it's interesting because I came away with my own personal opinion on videos. I said, okay, it can't be beyond 2 minutes. It can be no longer than 2 minutes. This was just my own personal takeaway. And then another thing that was very interesting though along the way was that in the end, despite the fact that I saw hundreds and hundreds of videos, one of the things that I felt uncomfortable with was the direct plea to the camera. I was uncomfortable with the notion of being videotaped. I was uncomfortable with that whole idea. And so, ironically, after watching all of these videos, in the end, we ended up doing a voiceover, which was a slight concern because we didn't see a lot of them at the time. But it really worked for us. And we tried to make the music entertaining and energetic so that you had a good energy when you saw it. We started off with the question, where are the action figures for girls? and they don't exist. And so once we were able, we said it's less Hooters, more heroin is what we were doing. And so the minute that we started with those images and we did this kind of comparison and showed that there was in fact an issue, because not many people thought about it in their day-to-day, but this was something obviously that we'd spent almost 2 years in development on. Once we started launched with that question, I think we kind of caught the audience, and then we were able to go into it. I think also in terms of, not just storytelling, but when you're in this kind of design process for Kickstarter, it's not just about, for us at least, I think our success was not just about the story. So we had this, like I said, less Hooters, more heroin. We had this reinvention of the superhero myth where the child is the superhero and the figures are the personification of her powers. As we like to say, it's character, not characters. But the third factor was that we spent as much time on the development of the design and the engineering and the execution. And that brought us a huge audience that was unexpected, but not any less important in the long run for us in terms of success.
And Dave, how about you? I mean, you have a very specific approach to shooting videos.
Well, yeah, we've done a couple of them now, and I have to say my partner Calvin started out at 15, and when you have a 15-year-old business partner, you get very different results. So we kind of let him guide some of that, and he had some real uncynical, very fresh thinking on how to a video, and he had very firm opinions on, we shouldn't talk, we shouldn't show people, we should just show the product and let the product be the hero in the process. And so we have a very, if you check out some of our projects, you'll see that there's no people and there's no title slides, and there's just fun music and quirky manipulations of the product throughout the process, and it's kind of fun and hopefully memorable. And charm is our kind of thing that we turn up to 10 or 11 if we can.
It's convenient when you have it, yeah.
Yeah, well, and so, we try to have fun with it. Everyone's there to be entertained, but nobody wants to get a corporate presentation on, here's why you should buy this, So we try to keep it light and fun and charming that way.
Yeah, and what's been your approach to crafting genuine and engaging videos and storytelling?
Yeah, so ever since I was at uni, I've always taken pictures of everything, no matter how irrelevant it seems, which, when it came to doing the Kickstarter campaign, was actually incredibly useful. And I also made little films. I'd always been really into doing that, which meant that when eventually I came to crafting a video, I had these little bits of footage from my studio at university, right from the beginning, which was super, super useful. But I think, really, I was also very not interested in being in front of the camera. I wanted the product to speak for itself, if possible. I wanted my experience to speak for itself. And because I'd been through this whole journey of developing a bit of a community around my previous project and having a bit of chatter online, that kind of helped me a little bit in terms of being able to say, hey, these people are interested in it. Maybe you'll be interested too if it's the type of thing you're interested in. So just that back end of my story really helped me out, because otherwise I think I wouldn't necessarily have known where to start, because I think, my project came from that really internal place. But also, I've got to say, my experience in advertising did help a little bit. And it was because I was so used to, I was on the strategy side, so, I was working on a lot of research and sort of brand development, but actually I'd see brand videos coming in and out of the agency a lot. I'd see brand manifestos coming in and out of the agency. They're things that I'd be looking over. And I think actually that experience really, really helped as well. So yeah, maybe some of you guys work in that industry or not, but there's loads of brand manifestos on the internet that you should go and check out because they're super useful. And as much as I looked at Kickstarter videos, as everyone does, I also did research in that world as well, because I kind of realized that, you're essentially trying to get a message to someone, and that's the same as in advertising, it's the same as on Kickstarter. So there's kind of a bit of a cross-pollination there, which I was lucky to have, see every day, but not everyone is.
Absolutely. So I'd like to talk about now sort of audience development. And obviously, one of the chief benefits of Kickstarter, aside from raising money, is of course building a community around your idea and around your project, and essentially identifying who are your biggest fans who want to support this right out of the gate and kind of raise their hand and say, I care about this enough to make it happen. But before you launched your campaigns, how did you figure out what the audience might be, and how did you begin engaging with them so that you could head into the campaign with both a strong sense of who they were, but also with actual strong support from the start? So Kelly, you mentioned that you had some sort of online success, and did that translate into the Kickstarter campaign?
Yeah, I think it did, because I had a fairly active Tumblr, I had a Facebook page. I think that was all at the very beginning, but I had quite active people on there. So I would ask people to submit images that they'd made with the camera that was the free download, and they'd have a bit of a conversation together. And that was, before I started the Kickstarter, that's what I was starting to find really interesting, that it wasn't actually just me talking to these people or them talking to me. They were kind of like talking to each other. I was like, oh, this is a really interesting thing that's happening. So I think that really did help, and it just meant that, yeah, I almost had a bit of a ready-made audience. And, I did do like outreach to like photography people, blogs, design, all the kind of average stuff. But I think that really was my like foundation stone as to where my original backers came from. I think they kind of believed in it. They knew that I think having the thing for free in the first place was a really good sweetener as well, because they knew that they liked it. Well, it's not that I don't think they owe me anything, but I think there was an element of belief in the project. Yeah.
Yeah, and so, I mean, Dave, you've obviously across 6 campaigns cultivated a fan base, we can call it, not just customers. What has been your experience with that? And are people coming back over and over again to support your projects?
Well, yeah, we started with around 500 people, I guess, and that includes my plumber, my auto mechanic, my barber. Every human being that ever gave me a business card is fair game, I think, in the beginning. And to be honest, we were really not surprised by our first project. We raised $80,000 on our first project and brought a lot of people into the project, and we could carry all of those people over to the next one. And we launched within 3 months of shipping the next project on Kickstarter, kind of had it ready to go. And we've slowly been able to ratchet up our family in the process. And people write in and they want to be put on the mailing list, and we start to collect all those things from our own e-commerce site, and lo and behold, we have 10,000 people now that we can go to at the beginning of every project and say, it's coming in 2 weeks, it's coming in 1 week, it's coming in 24 hours, and we can really get them excited and get them lined up and giving us comments and feedback and having them respond to what they think the price points of all the pledge levels are, and all that mechanical stuff. But on day one, we can flip the switch and tell everybody we're ready to go, and we can fund a project pretty quickly that way because we've built that community. So.
And Julie, I mean, you mentioned that you sort of found an audience on Kickstarter that you didn't know was going to be interested in the project. Can you talk a little bit about that too? Yeah,
we joke that we had the "if you build it, they will come" kind of moment for us. So we were focused on this notion of kind of the parent-child experience and creating a figure that would have a healthier breast-to-hip ratio and help to empower young children as they played. But something else happened along the way. And so when we launched, we had a $35,000 ask, and we felt good about kind of the friends and family and plumbers and butchers who would help us to create that goal. But instead, we were fully funded in 48 hours. And really what happened is that the collector community joined us. They were, they're early adopters, generally speaking. They were on Kickstarter. They were incredible. The first bit of press that we did really was a podcast with a collector community, and they are really great at spreading the word, and they were wonderful. So that helped. Another thing happened is, I'm not going to lie, we hit a cultural zeitgeist. We hit a moment in time where our development and our launch just happened at a really great time where people were talking more about this notion of female action figures and where are they. And so we were embraced, a week after Kickstarter, I was on Bloomberg. talking about it. And this was not anything that we had created by outreach. So I'm really grateful, and we feel really blessed and lucky that it happened, but we were able to use that to kind of push it through. And at the end, what happened to help us too was that Time Magazine named us one of the top 25 inventions of 2014 in November. And so then we added a whole nother audience. I say that's when the grandfathers showed up. And I joke that, who knew that they were the poster child for gender equality, but I love it. And so the audience, we created a product to fill a hole in the market, but what happened is it ended up appealing to more people than we expected. And it's been really amazing. And to your point, having the feedback that we've had, one of my favorite parts of this whole experience has been the emails with customers, with backers, and then customers post Kickstarter too. I love hearing their stories. I love finding out, which powers speak to them or their children or their grandchildren. We've had people using them in the classroom. We have play therapists using them in their therapy sessions. We have obviously children. We have collectors, and then also we had someone buy them for her bridesmaids. And then also another thing, when we designed them, a lot of thought was given to every single figure and what she stood for. And we gave Bravery a pink braid in honor of my mother who died of breast cancer. And so we actually do have a lot of people buying them for people who are struggling with health issues or other kinds of concerns. And that's another thing. We always envision them not just as a play thing, but also as a talisman to think about your kind of superpowers and your being your best self and finding your strengths.
Yeah, and we certainly hear this over and over again, that people learn new things about their audience or about the product that they've created from the people who turn out to support it on Kickstarter.
Absolutely.
So I'd like to turn now and talk a little bit about just kind of the nitty-gritty of how you make something. And this is, of course, what we're all focused on. We're creating things every day on Kickstarter. But how did you figure out, all right, what is the process going to be of going from this beautiful prototype that I've shot a video around and presented to, once I've wrapped up the campaign and I've got all these backers lined up, how am I going to deliver it? And Dave, obviously, this is baked into your philosophy. But I'm curious, has it always panned out the way that you imagine working with these factories? And what kind of planning do you do in advance?
Yes, is the short answer. But no, I'm a professional product developer, so I've made a lot of mistakes on other people's budgets and learned a lot along the way. Our philosophy is to, any prototype that we make that we're going to film or show with photography or anywhere in our campaign, as we put the campaign together, we try to make it on the machines that will be producing it at the end, in production. So I've learned that you can make a prototype one way, and then when you go to production, you don't get the same results, or there's lots of surprises, or there's minimum order quantities that you didn't plan on. So we get all of that learning out of the way through the prototype phase. So when we're ready to launch the little green button, push the button to get the project live, we've solved everything. I think a lot of projects that have famously struggled or failed, they just launched at the wrong time. They didn't get all their learning out of the way, or they made a prototype in some other process, and after the project is over, they go out and they find the real process that they're going to use in production, and they get surprised by all kinds of aspects: the cost of tooling, the cost of prototyping, buying inventory, all those things that you don't really know until you go through them. So we use the prototyping process to make sure that we're completely knowledgeable when we hit the green button and we're pushing it at the right time. So.
Interesting. And Kelly, what was your transition like of going from a handmade object that you'd worked out as a university project to a product?
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to say that my process was as thought through as yours, but it wasn't. I mean, I'd made this thing, it was a one-off, and I basically looked into ways to manufacture it, but at the point of me launching my Kickstarter, I'd only ever made like one or two of anything, ever. And so I was really going into the unknown, but so really what I had to do was just, research who was going to make it, tooling, all these things that were completely new to me. Basically, my kits are screen printed and die cut. They're all made with like small independent manufacturers in the UK. And a lot of people that I approached, they were like, that's way too complicated, we just can't do that. And I was like, oh God. And that really started to scare me a bit. And I was thinking, I've got this idea, but is it actually possible? And then I met with some other people who were going to do the die cutting, and I knew they could do the job, but I wasn't like, I didn't get on with them that well. And I was like, oh, I don't know if I can have a working relationship with you. So it actually took a long time to not only get costs down, but get suppliers down that I thought were going to do the job to my level. I mean, that might be because of like got mild OCD, but you know, it's important to get things right. So yeah, I was completely going into the unknown. But another thing I tried to really build in was time, and I got both of my cameras out completely on time, slightly early, but I gave it like 6 months because I was working full time. So I was only really doing this, you know, in the evenings, at the weekends. I'd take the odd vacation day from work and trying to get it done that way. So yeah, it was a complete unknown, but a risk that was completely worth it, despite the sleepless nights. And you learn so much along the journey. It's a great way to learn. And once you've done it once, it's so much easier. Second time round, you're on it. You know what to do. Yeah.
And you have one you can show to everybody's hand.
Yeah, but yeah, my prototyping was, I was basically screen printing it at my local place with my mate. I was just like trying to do it. I was cutting it out with a scalpel. It was not quite at the prototyping level. No, but you know, it gets there in the end, and as long as it gets the idea across, that's the most important thing.
And Julie, this was also your kind of first experience of manufacturing a physical product too. What did you do before the campaign, and you know, how did you continue on and fulfill the rewards?
One of the first things that we did was find a design team to help us. So, and it's funny because in hindsight, I was thinking about this the other day, that they must have been laughing hysterically at the first sketches we were sending them. Here they are, this professional design firm that, you know, designs action figures for major companies for a living, and we were drawing like pictures of Joan of Arc with armor on it, you know, like, and sending them off to them. But, you know, I keep saying the internet is a wonderful thing. And I found, the company's called 11dplex, and I found a video of Tim Conroy, the gentleman who runs it, talking about some sort of process. And I thought he seemed like he might be a cool guy to work with. And we reached out to him, and he really, I think, was intrigued with the idea of helping us to create something, because generally what he's doing is the companies are coming to him already with design, and then he does the engineering and prototyping. So this was a whole new kind of adventure for him as well. But you know, I had the same kind of, you know, getting dressed in the dark kind of experience, and I just kept saying, other people do this, so we can do this. And we just kept taking it step by step. So the first thing, and I would say, aside from trademarking, you know, my legal expenses were hands down the most expensive, you know, our highest expense. But second to that was the design plan. So we had this wonderful design firm in Cincinnati, and we just did conference calls weekly as we kind of went through the design process. You know, they joked that I slept with the Pantone book. I was obsessed with the color, and we went back and forth on that. So really, you know, all of that was designed and structured and created. And then, you know, Kickstarter is a wonderful, it's like the most amazing pay it forward kind of place. And so two lovely women who run Ruminate had already done their Kickstarter, and they were kind enough to give us Alice and Bettina, the name of their factory, which is, I recognize in hindsight, a huge thing. How do you find a factory in China? You know, there's thousands of them. And so we did talk to other factories as well, because we did our due diligence, but in the end we did end up using their factory. And so we were talking to them, I think we started in February, so we launched in May. So we had already were well into the process. So once we launched and started to see that, yes, indeed, we were going to have to fulfill this, then we started to commit, you know, obviously financially, and to start production. So we started production basically the day after we finished the Kickstarter campaign. And we had set a Christmas holiday delivery. And one of the things that was a priority from us long before we even pushed start was this notion that we had to fulfill on time. You know, we'd heard all these stories about Kickstarter fulfillment issues in terms of people not fulfilling on time or struggling to get it done. And so we really made that one of our top priorities. And so that's why we were, I guess, a little bit further along in the process than maybe some of the other companies when we launched. But having said that, you know, we spent very little money aside from that, you know, development and, like I said, legal, to get us to that place. But it allowed us to fulfill on time. When I went to Toy Fair in February, you know, that was really, that was over and over again what we heard, this notion of how did you do this in 8 months? And I think that that's because we put everything into place beforehand. And so that's what I would urge you to do everything that you could possibly do to get yourselves to that point before you go into Kickstarter.
Great. And in a moment, we're going to open it up to questions from the audience. I'm sure people have many things they'd love to ask you, but I would just like to ask, is there any piece of advice that you guys wish you'd received before you ran your first Kickstarter campaign, or something that in retrospect you wish you'd known? Kelly, how about you?
This is a tough question, but I don't think there's any specific nugget of advice, but one thing I wish I'd done more of in my first project, which I did more in the second project, was remember to kind of have fun with it. Because when the money came into my account after it had been funded, it was more money than I'd ever had in my account in my life. I'd go to the bank account, just go to the ATM just to check my balance. I'd have palpitations. And it's weird when you're not used to that, and suddenly, all of a sudden, you take everything very seriously. And actually, I wish I had had a bit more fun with it and relaxed a little bit, because I know in retrospect, you can say, it's going to be fine, don't worry. But I think maybe I was a bit uptight during that time. But yeah, just have fun. It's your project. It should be fun.
How about you, Dave?
Well, a couple. I think knowing that you have to build up PR momentum with your friends and family a month in advance. We didn't know that on our first project. We pushed the button and then started calling our friends, and the project bumped along until it finally crossed its goal. And I think if we could have built up a head of steam and pushed the button and then had more of an explosive effect in the first 48 hours, I think that would have been more effective to the project. You get about a third of your pledges in the first 72 hours. Pretty consistent. So you get about 15 on the back and about a third right there in the front. So that's the one time you can really control and really manage and build some sort of explosive beginning. So I think that plays a long role in where your project ends up in the end. So.
And how about you, Julie?
Actually, I think our biggest rookie mistake, listen, you're going to make mistakes. It's going to happen. Like I said, I like to call them rookie mistakes. They happen, you figure it out, you problem solve it, and you just keep moving forward. But our biggest one was fulfillment. And I actually wish that's one area, for all of my research, that was one area where we really didn't. And I don't mean fulfillment as in we produce the product. I mean as in, getting reward redemptions and really getting it set up and organized in a way that was efficient and well done. And so our shop host was our biggest rookie mistake, and I wish that I had kind of talked to more people about that at the end. I think even add-ons, we were like, oh, we'll add on T-shirts, we'll add on, it starts to become a little unwieldy in our enthusiasm. We were having a lot of fun with it. But, let's put 14 colors on the T-shirts. Sure, that'll be fun. Everyone will love them. But so we got in our fulfillment end, in our enthusiasm, in our excitement, in our gratitude, we went a little bit off the deep end there. And so that's where I wish that we'd had a little more planning. So.
Yeah, that is good advice, certainly. All right, well, so now we'd love to open it up to whatever questions you have here. And so if you have a question, we're going to form a line over my colleague Owen there has a mic. And we're also going to open it up to those of you who are sitting in the overflow space. If you want to come in, just please form a line here, and you can ask questions of our panelists here.
Here's one thing I would have wanted. Someone like me on a stage that I could ask questions of. So.
Well, this is an incredible opportunity then, right in front of everybody here. Okay, great.
But how much did each of you raise? Because that was never mentioned.
Okay, yeah, so my first project was around £35,000, so I'm not sure what the dollar equivalent of that is, probably like 60 at that exchange rate. Yeah, it was a bit more back then, I think. And then the last one was £39,000, so around about 65, 70. Yeah.
Yeah, my first one was 194,000, and then we followed it up with 80,000 for pucks, 35,000 for our tools project, I think 52,000 for our leather project. Birdhouse only did 9,000, my favorite project. And our current one, Fave, check it out, is we're at around 73,000 right now.
So we had a $35,000 ask. We were fully funded in 48 hours, and we came in just under $163,000.
Excellent. Yes, I think we take the first question here.
Yeah, and I'll tell you too. In hindsight, we thought we felt very comfortable with. We thought we were being very strategic with our $35,000 ask. We felt comfortable with kind of the ability to fulfill that based on our outreach and whatnot. But it wasn't until we were halfway through the project that we realized that as you showed, that most people are raising between $1,000 and $10,000. So trust me, I recognize the really incredible response that we had. It was really remarkable. The other thing too that happened is that initially we only priced out for US, and we had interest immediately from international. And so we're like, sure, $25 extra to ship it. And we sold all 50 states and 6 continents. We were really big, surprisingly big in Australia. We love our Australian backers, and as well as the UK. We got a lot of press in the UK, and that was really helped drive it even post-Kickstarter.
So one thing I do want to mention before we jump into questions is we may not have time for everybody to ask, but we will be migrating to the gallery and mingling afterwards, so you can obviously feel free to ask more personal questions too as we move into that. So let's go ahead.
The topic of intellectual property has come up a little bit thus far. Was it a similar experience for all of you, and do you feel in general that this is something that's pretty commonplace for most Kickstarter projects, where the intellectual property, copyright, trademark, et cetera, is done very early in the process, and that occupies a substantial amount of your financial resources and time?
I have a law degree, and so I'm not a practicing lawyer, but I do have a law degree, and so that may have driven me in terms of, but we trademarked, we have Superpowers Won Some, we trademarked Real Heroes Walk Among Us, we trademarked obviously our names. That was something that was a priority for us just from the start. And it's an interesting thing because we've been talking, someone was just asking me about this, and there's been a lot of interest in, can we, are there any accessories for the Courage series that we could do on a 3D printer. And we were very excited at the notion of doing that and doing some open-ended kind of product availability. And I don't know time-wise if we'll get to that until the Wisdom series, but that's this collaborative nature of kind of what's going on in the universe right now is something that I love and I want to embrace. But at the same time, the reality is that someone will lap you if you're not careful. And so you really do, I think, have to be mindful, especially when it is something that it's design, it's your creation, it's your idea. And so you want to protect it. And so, and yes, it's expensive because it's just a certain amount of money to file those trademarks. But I would urge people to do it because I think that, in the long run, it's, better safe than sorry.
Is there anything either of you would like to add there? Or?
I mean, it's kind of slightly different in the UK. I know here you can apply for a patent after you've done a Kickstarter. In the UK, you can't do that. So once your idea is out in the public realm, like you've got zero, you cannot patent that in the UK or in Europe. Is that the same here?
Yeah.
Is that the same here?
Yeah. Once the world sees it.
I thought there was a bit more leniency here. Okay, yeah, so with mine, and because I was like, didn't have any money, I think maybe I was in a position that most Kickstarter people are in. I just had this project that I wanted to share with the world. I didn't have any money. I was in a really entry-level job. I didn't have any savings. I'm common, so I didn't have any money. And then it was just a case of afterwards having to do design registrations and trademarking and sort of creating a bit of a matrix around it. But painting, I don't know, I'm not sure if it stops anyone. I couldn't afford to see them anyway.
Yeah. Well, our theory is we don't have enough money to fight.
Yeah, exactly.
So having a patent that gives us the right to fight but not have the money to fight means let's just save our money on getting the patents in the first place. So we do a lot of public domain-y kind of stuff, so there's not a lot of IP there. But.
Thank you.
Thank you.
When you hit the Go Live button and you launch your project, you have the full portfolio of all your appeal available to your backers, including perhaps primarily the drama of are we going to make it or not. You all obviously are very successful. You've always made it. I'm wondering, after you reach your goal, do you find that you have to change anything to keep the momentum up? Have you added reward tiers? Have you changed your message at all? Have you had to do anything to kind of keep the momentum up?
Well, as a repeat creator, we've never seen anything slow down once it funds. And again, because we have kind of so many friends that we can bring to it, our goals are really low. We know we can cross our goal really quickly. Our last one was 20 minutes. But it's $1,000, so easy to go. But no, we don't change anything. We just keep the drum beat up and continue with the idea of telling our story and giving people a really great time for the investment that they've made in our project. We make sure everyone's entertained, they learn something. We give them the whole behind-the-scenes story of how things are made. So when they finally get their product from us 3 or 4 months later, they can turn around and tell their friends about, hey, did you know this reclaimed wood came from, And that's, I think, part of the package that we like to offer. So.
I think that also, you do try to, you outreach toward press. So my husband emailed a local reporter, DNA Info, Upper West Side. She interviewed us the day after we launched, and she put it online, and that's what got us Bloomberg, that's what got us BBC News Radio, that's what got us ABC. So what happened is if you can get some media attention, then it can keep it going further, and that's, I think, very helpful. But to your point, I do think there is a psychology of success that goes on, and so once you're funded, it doesn't just stop. People really like this idea that they're backing a winner, and so you really don't necessarily, we talked about kind of the ebbs and flows. I found weekends slow. It was interesting to watch the patterns evolve, but we finished as strong as we started.
I think it's also kind of interesting as to what your project is, because we all have products, and essentially if someone wants the product and they've seen it's gone past the mark, they still want the product, they're going to buy it. If you're trying to fund like a dance piece or something that's maybe more local, once it's gone past the goal, what's the incentive for them to then continue to fund you? I think we're all in a very, very fortunate position that we can essentially make as many as we want of whatever we want.
Yeah. And I'll just add too, I think this is often where the importance of your backer updates come in too. So thinking about your backers not only as the people who have already supported the campaign, but really your fan base who is your best possible tool for spreading the word. So continuing to post compelling updates that tell the story in a deeper way, as you're saying, and giving them reasons to share it with their friends is always a great way to keep that momentum going.
So you started to touch on this a little bit with the last question, but attracting unique backers, and to piggyback on that a little bit with the media attention, do you approach that before your campaign launches or when your campaign launches?
We get the media lined up in advance when we use media. Some projects we bring a PR agency in and we kind of let them help us. Mm-hmm. But more and more we've gotten so many of our own so many of our own family members that we can rely on to start the project, and we've built relationships with the media through previous contacts. We can now just contact them a week in advance and say, hey, you asked me to tell you when we've got something new. We've got something new. Here it is. It's going to go live on Monday. Willing to give you an exclusive if you would like. So yeah, don't be quiet leading up. You really got to tell everybody. It's not a secret. And when you push the button, you got to make sure everyone's ready to go and lined up. Your press is embargoed, so all that press starts landing on the day of the project launch or soon after. You want all that concentrated energy around your launch. And the press will do that for you. So if you ask them to embargo until this date, so
Okay.
common.
Thank you.
Month in advance.
Hi, I just actually launched my project today, Welly Bottle for some shameless PR. Thank you very much. And just even today, I've recognized that I'm getting hit up by so many people for cheap advertising, for cheap PR. I have been working with bloggers and influencers before the campaign launched, but ever since just seeing all these people, I'm wondering if you guys ever used those. It is cheap, and I'm trying to do my research, but all it is really a web page to look through. What's your experience with it, if you have, in terms of getting the word out?
Yeah, I don't know about those things. I don't find them very trustworthy, but I think it's like a gut instinct. I think maybe you just have to go with that. And also, I know a few people that have done Kickstarters as well, and I'd chat to them and say, I'm being approached by all these people. Have you ever used them? They seem to have a good deal on the go, but the reality is I don't think anyone's really had any success. But at the time, they've got you at a point of desperation, right? You're like, okay, I need to meet my goal. I need to do this.
Easy. Why not?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
Exactly.
it's throwaway really at some point, but yeah, I've never heard of a good one, and maybe the good ones are super expensive and I just don't know about them. I don't know, but you can build your own community up. You don't have to rely on people like that. You can just look on like LinkedIn for journalists and work at that email address. It's not so hard. I mean, there's ways around it. Don't do it.
And I'm going to name names because I think this is fair to everybody in the room. We hit one called Crowdfunding Ninja.
Yep.
Nice guy. Ryan, really nice guy. $0. $500, 0 pledges.
And I also...
And it's all Facebook and Twitter, and he owns like 100,000 connections. And I pushed hard on him. I said, look, I'm going to be entirely vocal on your performance, and we got nothing at all. Not even one look-see. So
I appreciate that's one of them.
Yeah, we never did this. I have to, one of the things, 0 paid advertising in 1 year. I talked about putting money toward IP. I talked about putting money toward design. Obviously, we put money toward fulfillment, but we've spent $0 on paid advertising. Now, it's time for me to do that. That's my next 6 months is my marketing. But again, it's funny listening to you because one of the things that's keeping me up at night is this notion. So I was an accidental music producer for 5 years. And one of the things that my husband and I talk about all the time is like, you can make a really nice music video. That doesn't mean that someone's going to see it. And so, you can put stuff out there. What I have found fascinating is sometimes a blog post will go up from a very well-known mommy blogger, let's say. And I'm so grateful for it. It's wonderful to help with brand identity, but that's not when... It took me a while to get smart and to put in the "how did you find out about us" question on my thing. But I urge you all to do that day one because I really missed a lot of information. Yeah. But more often than not, a friend told me about this, or I saw it on my Facebook, thing. But that's not a bought one. That's because someone's sharing it. And so you want to believe that putting money into these marketing campaigns or putting it out there is going to generate a response. I think you would be surprised at how big it has to be to actually see that. So I'm really, that old commercial, she told 2 friends, and she told 2 friends, she told 2 friends. That's really what you want. And I think that's, how it happens, not just at Kickstarter, but in general.
We know it takes 400 impressions to get 1 pledge from a number of different studies that we've done. With our friends and family, it takes 200. These are people who know us, my own sisters. right? I get them hit and miss. They don't back everything, you
You
know?
did really well on that. So on both of my projects, only 10 people I know backed it.
Wow.
I was like, I don't know,
But-
maybe
but
that's just
do the math on 400 to 1. That's a lot of eyeballs you got to get in front of, and you got to get in front of the right ones. And sometimes hiring a PR agency is the only way to do it. And you shouldn't be paying more than, say, $5,000 to sort of get them engaged for the length of the project. If they want 10 or more, forget it. If you're paying more than 7% of your total to have professionals target you to the right people, you're probably paying too much.
It's tricky. It's so funny. I'm very down on it. I have a friend in the music business. He said, "Yeah, Jay-Z's PR person is great because it's Jay-Z." And so there is a certain element. I think part of the Kickstarter ethos is, it's crowdfunding, collaboration, word of mouth, sharing what you know, paying it forward. And I really think that'll kind of, in the end, prove to be your bread and butter more than paying for the hits.
Definitely. Welly bottle, that is, Welly bottle, again, for more word of mouth. Thank you.
Don't be afraid. It's okay.
All right, last question.
I backed a project once that had an issue because they were like 1,500% funded, and they just had, they were overwhelmed with how many film filmmates they had to deliver. How do you plan on being able to work on just your ask if you get that, or a little more, or 10 times more, without getting a hiccup in your stream?
I don't quite get the question. I can't hear.
Being overwhelmed by your
yeah,
response.
yeah,
I think
okay.
how do you plan for a variety of different outcomes? If you just hit your goal, or if you exceed it 10 times, or how are you prepared for each of those scenarios?
Well, I wasn't really prepared for any of. I didn't even expect to meet my target the first time, and I was in a position where I didn't really have any economy of scale. I was paying, for screen printing, die cutting, it all costs the same, whatever. And actually, it was kind of a challenge to make 3 times as many as I'd anticipated for, but when it comes down to it, you just kind of handle it because you have to. Like, however many backers you've got 50 backers, you've got 800 backers, you've got 800,000 backers, whatever. That's like a lot of individual promises you've got to keep. That's the way I personally see it. And I kind of feel like if big companies can do it, anyone can do it. To your point, like, you can do it, it's fine. And just, you can budget for it.
To me, one of the things you need to do is invest in your crowd, your backers, and by keeping them informed and entertaining them and informing them, so when the day comes where your project is big or you run into problems, you can dip into that well of trust and say, look, I've really tried hard to get this out on time. We're going to be able to ship some of them in this month, some of them in that month. It's not what we planned, but that's the way it is because of this reality. And you'll only get that permission if you invest in them as well. You have to earn their trust, so that's why frequent updates are really important, keeping them involved, giving them a role, and recognizing that it's not a financial transaction, it's a kind of house party. That's when that sort of thing pays off. Luckily, we haven't had a problem with it yet, but someday, maybe.
It's fun. I can't remember. We were talking so much backstage. I don't remember what I said already. But we flew. Did I talk about flying in half my product? So we had some issues because the dock workers were striking in California, and we did have this December delivery goal, and so we ended up flying in half the product. Yes, it was expensive, but again, it was about fulfilling our obligations to our backers. And the way that I looked at it was that this extra money was, at the end of the day, not going to put me under. It wasn't going to destroy my business. But if I didn't spend the money, I could be dead in the water because, we didn't have the product delivered in time. So we flew in half the product, and so we were able to fulfill Kickstarter. What happened is that the second half of the product landed off the coast of California, and I think it was December 8th. And on December 12th, I found out that they had delayed delivery. They were telling me December 19th at the earliest. And so I had all of these, the month after Kickstarter was as important to us as during Kickstarter. We had so many people who showed up after the party was over. And I had all of and then obviously after the Time magazine, happened. So I had so many people who were expecting it for holiday. And we, I emailed each one of them. We kept it honest. I was, honesty's a superpower. And, everyone said, send a MailChimp. And I said, no, I can't. That's not who we are. I can't do that because I'd already heard from so many people. It's like you said, it's this group, it's so personal to everyone. They really are. I spent 3 days emailing everyone individually. And then I waited for the cancellations. I offered cancellations, and I was prepared. I thought we'd lose them all, and I maybe lost 24 people. People were wonderful. People were amazing. It was this has been the most wonderful experience. One of the things that we didn't talk about, we talked about it backstage, is customer service, right? You don't really think about that when you're designing your product and you're being all creative and you're thinking about what you're going to put out into the world. But the thing that I've actually loved the most, that's been the most surprising to me, is the customer service and the interaction with the people. And I do think that's one of the things embedded in the Kickstarter experience, because everybody is so invested in your success. And like I said, it flowed right over into the post-Kickstarter experience. So I don't even know what the question was anymore. I think it was about being overwhelmed by the numbers. The other thing that we did do too, I will say, is we had a fulfillment house. In my dream world, there's this very inexpensive warehouse in Manhattan where I could have put things and gone to myself and hired all my teenage son's friends, and we could have fulfilled it and saved the money, but it just wasn't realistic. And so that was another expense. So yeah, we ended up with a fulfillment house in California. So as soon as it cleared customs, finally, we started shipping the second half the first week of January.
Thank you very much.
And I think we do need to wrap up with formal questions right now, but I hope you'll all join us in the gallery. We've got an amazing show showcasing a lot of great products made through Kickstarter and the prototyping process that led to it. So please join us, and you can obviously accost or politely introduce yourself to our panelists here and get more of their wisdom. But thank you so much for joining us, Kelly, Dave, and Julie.